So,
The only thing would be like if you were. Lest everybody hear what I'm saying. No, the only thing would be if you had a separate feed for the.
yeah. Like,
And then you switch back
I
and
think they're
forth.
gonna they said something about like editing it later.
Yeah. Assuming they have the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a concern for future.
Yeah, right now there's not much you can do. That's it then, huh? Okay. Cool.
I'm just gonna hang around and take pictures.
Okay.
In like 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, once people start going.
Yeah, sure.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, so just like make sure it's like on.
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
And you have Hoover, right?
I've signed on them through the browser. I didn't download
Oh,
the
okay,
app.
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, you don't have the app?
We can scrounge together. There is plenty of space. Okay, well, if the girls want to sit together, then I suggest the middle. I can move over. Now you're up here. Well, you know, the mask. You know, I have a new one actually. Well, the dispensary has not found traffic. And there's one called the Gambit. It used to be east. That's Sunset.
Do you like that?
They're expanding. We got a bit bigger.
No, it was never
Great piano, great sound system, exquisite food. Every Friday, Saturday, soon we're adding some
Really hard.
Does he look like a guy named Ruff? Good. No, it's definitely the stage feels great. It's hard to do this dispensary, which was more like a dance bar, a certain value, but still fun as well. This is more like a really I'm impressed you can
I'm gonna read the one about the school.
Oh, would you look at it?
Yeah, Pango's near there.
Okay,
I used to have perfect, actually better than perfect.
Know the area. Welcome. Used to run the county proceedings.
Oh, yeah.
And I had great organizations. Actually, most of my career, they were contacts, and I could change contacts in the middle of the night. So but once I had the, I figured out what to do. And then when they can redo it, but then it's weird.
I've also been married for 40 years.
I still want to do it. I can.
My wife's sociology.
Oh my God. But you know how to turn on the microphone? And he was just here. He was just here and he left because I sent him.
May I be of assistance?
How do you turn? Yes!
Yeah, hearing it went a long time ago. I have big hands stop this.
Okay.
Laugh about it because every year my physical.
Where does it go to?
My hearing is pretty good.
Health inspector and
I tell this guy the same ideology for years. Say the same shit to him every time. He go, Harry, you're here so better than average. I don't know how you can hear something like gun fly or this. It's weird because Remember my wife? I was like, you're a fucking It was the same joke every time. And then I tell my wife that, and she's like, oh, that's real funny. She goes, Bob, that's fucking true. I go, I wasn't saying it wasn't true.
Trying to find a mix of swords.
Trixie Lore. Where did I go?
I can take this moment to thank you all for coming. I'm Craig Sorkin, Executive Director of PAMLA. And we hope you, thank you all for everybody who agreed to be one of our speakers. You're going to be live streamed. I hope you don't mind. Because we have almost more people because of the strangeness of the times. We're going to be watching you on live streaming than in person, but all is good. I don't want to in any way say thank you to everybody who came in person. And everybody's invited to the presidential address at 5:15. There's another session in between, but that should be great. And then the reception, if you guys want to come to a reception or any part of the conference, keep coming. We love having museum directors, authors, amateur historians, actual historians, English professors, French professors, Spanish professors, Italian professors, philosophers. PAMLA is a big, weird tent. And I'm a big, weird guy who loves PAMLA. So thank you so much. And thank you so much to both of our chairs and exciting officers who put us together. Are we good?
Yes. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you all.
And thank you all for being here. And if this is being streamed, thank you to all who are looking from afar. And welcome to, this is our round table. Can't you tell from all the round tables here? And, well, there is one little one right here. That's what it's called. But we are also called Las Vegas Subverting the Myth. My name is Megan Edwards. I'm the author of 3 novels set in Las Vegas. Before turning to fiction, I wrote a memoir about my 6-year odyssey on the highways and byways of North America in the wake of a California wildfire that destroyed all my earthly possessions. If someone had told me at the outset of my travels that I would eventually end up in Las Vegas and that I would decide to make this city my home, I would have laughed with incredulity. But that's what happened. I came here to do research for a novel for what I thought would be a few weeks, and that was at the end of 1999. What we are presenting today is something I would have loved to attend back when I was a newcomer, a virtual tasting menu of the cultural landscape of Las Vegas, which means you'll be taken beyond the stereotypes, known the world over, into truly fascinating territory. Each of our panelists could easily captivate you for the entire length of this session. What you will receive is just a small plate of their work and their insights. I have no doubt you will leave this session hungry for more. With this introduction to this remarkable assemblage of artists, scholars, and authors, you'll know where to turn. Each panelist will speak for 5 minutes. After that, my co-moderator and I will pose a question to each. After that, we'll open things up for discussion. Now I'd like to introduce my fellow moderator who will introduce our first speaker. Oksana Fioti is the author of American Gypsy, a memoir, and Donati's Lunatics, a novel. Her writings have appeared in Rumpus, Slate, and Time magazines, and in a number of literary journals and anthologies. Oksana was the 2013 Library of Congress Literary Award recipient. She is the current guest editor of the critical journal of Romani Studies at the Central European University in Budapest, and the 2020 recipient of the Picador Excellence in Literature Award from the University of Leipzig, Germany. Oksana holds an MFA in creative writing. She teaches at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. Oksana.
Hi, welcome everyone. All right, I think a quick note I wanted to make about the questions. I think everyone is going to speak first, right? And we will ask questions later, just to clarify that for you as well, so you don't panic. All right, so our first presenter is Uli Geisendorfer. Uli is a lifelong musician and music and language professor at UNLV, has performed with such musician luminaries as Wynton Marsalis, Tito Puente, Ute Lemper, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Brandon Fields, Leslie Uggams, Sam Most, David Cassidy, Rick Margitza, Dick Griffin, and the Connecticut Opera. He will present on the inner workings of music and linguistic analogies. Music is a language with as many dialects as there are individuals participating. It has a grammar with clear elements of syntax. And as a musician, I'm really looking forward to this one.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, it's a privilege to be here, and I find this an amazing event, PAMLA. It's the first time I really am getting aware of it, and I must admit, just by the presenters and what I see that's coming up, I'm very intrigued. So I'm speaking about music as a language, which probably to most of you is kind of an open book. There seems to be a lot of analogies, but I want to close in on some of these. And the first one I want to do, I need your participation. Da 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 da. Thank you very much. Da 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 da. Ah, wonderful. This goes really well. So right there we've had a conversation, albeit a very short one, but there is a mutual understanding. Although I don't know how many musicians are indeed in the room, we have a musical basis. And this can go even further. It doesn't even have to be a melody. Let's try this one. Yeah, see. Okay, that's for the younger ones. We Will Rock You by Queen, but I've heard it. Yes, thank you very much. I love when people just jump in and participate. So, please, I will not try to insult you, but here's the definition of language. The principal method of human communication consisting of words using in a structured and conventional way, conveyed by speech, writing, or gesture. Well, everything in this can actually be translated to music, and I will show you how. But first of all, what is music? I will give you my own point of view. I'm a musician, a lifelong musician, composer, educator. For me, it is the language of the heart. Why? Because it is the most basic expression that we will find. What's the first communication you have? The mother to her child. Johnny, Astrud, Craig, Oksana. It's usually the minor third, and it usually goes like this. If it would go up, which you will have in language as well, it would suddenly be a question. Johnny, Craig, Oksana, and you're already fearing for the worst. And so, let's look at the elements of music. The most basic elements are melody. Actually, the first one is even rhythm, melody, and harmony. How do they relate to language items? Well, rhythm is the rhythm of speech that everyone has. Different languages have different rhythms, different musics have different rhythms, so it's a very obvious one. Melody, again, very obvious. Every language, every dialect has its own speech. That's how we can actually figure it out. You hear somebody go like, wait a second, you're from the Midwest, or, that sounds more like Cockney, although the language might be a little truncated as well, but the melody, it's obvious. And then dynamic, same thing. Dynamic also carries a lot of intent, which we're going to talk in a moment about. And then, of course, the phrasing. Young man, you are here tonight. Young man, you are here tonight. I could say it also with young girl. I have a 17-year-old daughter, so it might be actually more appropriate. Now, let's get to the elements of language. What is the first one? We have a noun, right? What do we have in music? We have a subject or main motive. Since we're in Las Vegas, I have to, of course, quote Frank Sinatra, "Fly me to the moon." Okay. Then we have an object. It's a contrasting motive. In other words, blah, 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 you know, the song. So the contrasting motives, and this microphone is a little low, so forgive me while bending over. So you have the noun, the object. And by the way, in other words, did you know that that was the original title of the song Fly Me to the Moon? And it was also written as a waltz for musicians. Now, what's an adjective? The mood or the motive, you know, you modify the noun. Like, let's take a simple melody, a German melody that you have probably in English too. Alle meine Entchen schwimmen auf dem See, so da 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 dum, just up the scale. Let's do that in minor. Da 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 dum, da 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 dum. Suddenly, you start to go more into Eastern European regions. So that is the modifier, the adjective. Bright, dark, you know, slow, fast. Yes. Where are we? I'm at 1 minute. Okay, and I haven't even covered my introduction. No, I'm just kidding. So what else do we have? We have prepositions. That would be like in an ensemble, certain motives, the way, like a violin, the way you play it, or da 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 da, or you can do all kinds of things. You have conjunctions, and you can, you know, the analogies go on and on and on. And so one aspect I wanted to talk about is as well the relationship of the listener and the participant and the musician. You know, very much like in any conversation where it's so important when you zoom in, when you look into the other person's eyes, when you see the lips move, when you feel their energy, when you hear the diction, that's the fantastic thing about radio, you know, you get even more zoomed in into the voice. The same thing you have in music. You know, when you play, it's only as good as the audience allows you. The back and forth is basically exactly the same. You are trying, language and music are based on waves, right? We all waves, we all radiating, we all vibrating in a certain way. Our heartbeat adjusts to the speed of sound as well. If you listen to a slow song, our heart actually will relax. If we listen to something really fast, our heart will go pumping. And this synergy between the musicians and the audience is maybe one of the most important things, and that's what makes music such a universal language and maybe the most basic languages of all. Because we don't need to know the verbs, we don't need to know any of the items, the specific items. We can understand music with our hearts.
All right, so it's a very small crowd. We're going to make it a little informal, more informal than usual, all right? Quick note to the panelists. I'm actually going to sit in the front, and when you're at 4 minutes or so, I'll just wave at you, and that way you know when you're coming close to time, all right? Okay, thank you so much.
And I would like to add that if you come to the reception this evening, you can have the pleasure of hearing Uli demonstrate exactly what he was just talking about, because he and his trio will be performing for us. It is a true wonderful treat. I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it, so I hope you'll join us. Mark Hall Patton is the recently retired museum administrator for the Clark County Museum System, where he oversaw the Clark County Museum, the Howard W. Cannon Aviation Museum, and the Searchlight History Museum. Prior to that, Mark was director of the San Luis Obispo County Historical Museum in California. Mark is a MAP, Museum Assessment Program, surveyor for the American Association of Museums and the author of 2 books and over 400 published articles. He has written and produced 48 local history videos and is regularly seen on the History Channel's Pawn Stars as a visiting expert. Mark Hall Patton.
And oddly enough, I'm going to talk about museums. I know you're startled by that, probably only because that's the title of the talk. So, museums in Las Vegas? Really? Wow! Yes, of course we've got museums in Las Vegas. I ran 3 of them. Ooh. But even here, they're Las Vegas. They are a little bit different. The Clark County Museum, one of my museums, we've got historic structures out there. You can go see them. It's open 7 days a week. We got reopened in August of last year, full time, to the public, completely safely. But when you come out and see the historic structures at the Clark County Museum, you get to see a wedding chapel. Of course, it's Las Vegas. 3% of all the weddings in the United States happen here. We don't do weddings out there, by the way, but it's a business here. So we have a wedding chapel out there. We also have the home of the first black family who were allowed to live in Boulder City. That was a completely segregated community when it got started. And rather than let that get bulldozed, we took the building, we got it restored, and it's open. You can see it out there. Is that the only museum in the valley? No. We also have one, a deconstructed museum, as I like to call it, the Howard W. Cannon Aviation Museum. Any of you fly here today or yesterday? Okay. Did you go through McCarran International Airport? Did you happen to see any history exhibits in there? Those were mine. That's the Howard W. Cannon Aviation Museum. It's there. It's at the Henderson Executive Airport. It's at the North Las Vegas Airport. It is the most visited, least known museum in the state of Nevada. Nobody even knows it's a museum. That's great. They stop, they look at it, they learn something. You know, it's a wonderful museum, and it's funded by the Department of Aviation. I don't mind. Also funded me for 28 years. So I was okay. But is that the only thing? No, we've got the National Atomic Testing Museum here. I didn't run that one. I'm on the executive committee, so I have to point that out. But it's a great museum. If you want to learn about blowing up big holes in the desert just north of here, it is really a great museum to go to. But is that the only one? No. We've got the National Museum of Organized Crime and Law Enforcement. What is that? The Mob Museum, of course. But we've got that. And we had the mob here too. You know. We've got the Neon Museum. But lest you think that we've only got ones about those kinds of pieces, no, we've got a wonderful natural history museum here. We've got a wonderful children's museum here. We've got the old Las Vegas Mormon fort here. The first building built in Las Vegas. When the Mormons came in here in 1855 and turned around and left in 1857, people say the Mormons founded Las Vegas. No, they founded a settlement here and then turned around and left 2 years later. So don't ever tell them that they built what's here now. They came back in later on. That's very true, but that they didn't stick around the first time. We've got the Nevada State Museum and Historical Society at the Springs Preserve and the Springs Preserve's own Origin Museum. We've got the Las Vegas International Scouting Museum. You want to see more scouting patches than you ever wanted to see? You can see them there. We've got that. We've got the Burlesque Hall of Fame if you're not into scouting patches. You know, we've got all kinds of museums here. We've got the Hispanic Museum of Nevada, though I'm not sure that one's reopened yet. but that's in the Boulevard Mall. We've got, down in Boulder City, we've got the Boulder City Hoover Dam Museum in the Boulder Dam Hotel. It's actually in the hotel there, you know, and so you can go down there and see that. The Hoover Dam Visitor Center is back open now, though tours of the dam are not yet being done, but it's a wonderful museum. Got a minute? Thank you. I've been married 43 years. I'm good at following directions. We've got the Nevada State Railroad Museum and a railroad there. That's down at Boulder City as well. We've got the Marjorie Barrick Museum at UNLV, and we've got the Thunderbirds Museum that is actually on Nellis Air Force Base. And these are all the real museums. These are 501c3s or 170A1s. That's government or private nonprofits. And I'm not talking about fake museums like Zach Baggins' Haunted Museum or the Pinball Hall of Fame. Those are fake museums. Those are attractions. They're not real museums. So I'm going to get down and try to catch us back up. Be happy to answer any questions at the end.
The Pinball Hall of Fame does have real pinball machines.
Oh, absolutely. Largest collection in the world.
Harry Fagal. Harry Fagal grew up in Las Vegas, graduating from UNLV and becoming a police officer with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, where he served for 25 years. Retiring as a captain, he continues to live in Nevada, writing poetry and consulting. Harry has been published numerous times, and his two books, Street Talk and Undercover, are both offered by Zeitgeist Publishing. His CD, Word Murder, is available through Wood Shampoo Records. Harry has represented Las Vegas in National Poetry Slam and writes tributes, eulogies, and other works as a commissioned artist. Harry loves his family more than anything. Harry Fagal.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction that I wrote. And so this is really kind of wobbly, isn't it? This is gonna be a problem because I move around a lot when I read, but here we go. I'm burning time. So what I'm gonna do today to introduce you to what I do as a poet is I'm gonna read you a poem from a series of poems called the Vegas Talk Poems, which is, there's Vegas Part 1, Vegas Part 2, Vegas Part 3, and it just keeps going part until this one, which is Part 11. I'm not gonna say all the parts up to that one, you can fill it in. You see the dirty homeless human, stinking, reeking, trash bag laden, sidewalk pillow and gutter footrest paper and unmentionables scattered about. Ground fetid and fecal with stained horror, you step right through this ghost. Past the sadness and on you go. Feet beating the ground, pound and pound and pound, and on you go. Tricksy horror beckons from scattered cars, huge-breasted and welcoming, rain down from illegal immigrants who line the avenue in redundant constants, flipping and clicking and shaking in orange shirts with live girls and blazing feet smacking the ground, pound, pound, and pound you go on. Huge monuments stain the eye and testament to copycat wealth once only promised from glorious mafioso, and now real and complete. The corporations line the boulevard, reaching from street to sky in impossible neon configuration. Foreign bodies squeeze past in the summer heat. The smells are innumerable: perfume and underarm sweat, cigar smoke and marijuana, the occasional patchouli stench, and ever-present farts and cigarettes and stale booze from oversized plastic drinking statues. Arms pumping and feet beating the ground, pound, and on you go. Street performers and doppelganger celebrity are washed in passing car lights. Robert De Niro from Raging Bull next to Robert De Niro from The Godfather, next to 3 different sets of Kiss emulators, next to a pedophile in a Minion costume, next to the Avengers, next to Batman and Robin and some mostly naked, fat, middle-aged man in a G-string and nothing else, next to fake police officers with sexy booty shorts and a pimp smiles and beats a skinny black prostitute, and no one says shit because they think it's a show. Faster now you go, pound, and on you go. Taxis scramble for people too non-tech to have an Uber app, and limos stealth slowly by. Monster trucks and obnoxious sign-bearing conveyances draw the eye in endless madness. Wedding chapels proclaim famous married folk from every corner, and the lights, the endless lights, flash and crash in some insane symphony for the terminally excited. Slim youth with earnest faces carry signs and megaphones and tell you loudly you have sinned. You're going to hell. And they are so sure, I'm not so sure they're wrong. In the few shadows, predators roam, eyeing the passerby and sniffing the air for fear. And hands deep in pockets, they wait to dole out pain for personal belongings. Real police now glide by in formations, neck rotating back and forth, seeking out the suspicious and deadly, or maybe just checking out the ass on the hot Spanish girl 10 feet ahead. No acid, no psychotropic mind melt, no lithium backwash. This adult Disney is just what it is. Vegas, baby. Right here now, all the champagne slot machine, rolling dice, spinning wheels, shuffling cards, cigarette girl, high dollar honeypot, cash credit, marker chips, breaking banks and hearts. And Vegas is an elephant eaten by blind men and coveted like a pretty neighbor. And chance is gambling and gambling. The faces, eyes wide and filled with wonder and fear too. And I'm here too with a pen and a gun and an eye on that run in her long silken stocking. And you realize as you pound and pound and you go on, you haven't even entered a fucking casino yet. Time. Oh, how about one more then? This is from 2021, that was from 2017. This poem's called Doom. This is my philosophy wrapped up into a poem. Men on corners shouting, doom, doom, almost invisible in their never-ending presence. The end is nigh, whispers in the wind as cars drive by with giggling skeptics. The ragtag doom crier, hair akimbo and eyes crossed, frothy spit machine gun in the air, points at the sky and screams, these humans are not wrong. The end is coming indeed. If life is a tunnel, we are in the darkest parts until that moment in the great distance. Daylight is a pinprick on the basalt sheet. We strive and upstream towards it all of our lives, the inevitability of death, the will-o-wisp we follow. Or perhaps it's a tunnel of light filled with promise and magic. At the end, the pinprick now of darkness still beckons. So the end is coming for each and every living thing. After that, it's the ultimate unknown. Of course, religion attempts to explain how the rewards of the afterlife are plentiful. Is it a way of controlling an errant population? Is it a way of comforting us against the pain of the unknown? Is it a way of creating community? Regardless, it's a beautiful story, but still the end is nigh. Heaven may be an empty promise, or perhaps paradise is the answer. We take comfort in faith, but we really just don't know. Let go and let God, the axiom of the wise. People wield their belief like a cudgel, smashing through the things which create fear, giving comfort for the moment, yet the light or dark still beckons. Doom, doom, might as well be live, live, for is not death ultimately the greatest reason to live? The fact that the hourglass runs out, the truth of our fragile, tenuous moments, fracturing and returning to the mud, our greatest connection, our birth and our death. We are all born, we all die, we all make what matters in the in-between, yet I can't help but wonder if energy cannot be destroyed, only transformed. Perhaps our souls refresh and repeat and return, or again, perhaps we are all one soul, permanent, infinite, born with the universe and dying with the stars. I don't know, I just don't. So in the crushing weight of the inelectable, So in the crushing weight of the inelectable, I pause and breathe. The tunnel is dark. The tunnel is light, the tunnel is balance, and I walk through, head up, eyes clear, and I'm so glad, so very glad, just to be alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. We're glad that you're here. And now I would like to introduce Jarrett Keene. Jarrett Keene is an assistant professor in the English department at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where he teaches American literature and the graphic novel. He has written books, travel guide, rock band biography, poetry collections, and edited short fiction anthologies such as Las Vegas Noir and Dead Neon, Tales of Near Future Las Vegas. For more than a decade, Keene was the contributing music editor at Vegas 7 magazine and a book critic for the Tucson Weekly. Jarrett Keene.
Right.
Okay, so Las Vegas. What is it? Why are we here? What are people fascinated by? All I can think about are those stories I've read over the last decade or so. Those news stories, you know, they often appear in places like Drudge Report, the Vidara Death Ray, tourists beheading rare birds in the Flamingo Hotel, people living and dying in the storm drains, Heart Attack Grill, where you can eat your way to a coronary, and then when you die, have your ashes displayed for future customers. Creech Air Force Base, where drone pilots, decide who lives and dies, and they drive home to their Las Vegas suburb. Las Vegas has long been a post-apocalyptic terrain environment, especially if you're a journalist. But to those of us who live here, it's home. It's a place of opportunity, right? It's where we have our jobs, enjoy our colleagues, we raise families, we do all the things. And yes, it's true, we rely on the nasty coverage of Las Vegas to a degree. Its wild and dystopian reputation. For many of us, sadly, Las Vegas is, the high point of our biography. Born and raised in Las Vegas, Jared Keene. I mean, you give your kids that opening to their biography, it's great. Born and raised in Las Vegas. To get what we want, we have to embrace the dark side. To get what we want, we need rising occupancy rates, we need rising student enrollment, we need rising real estate values, we need people to love and fear us in this city. And it's all due really to, well, it's a few things. It's atomic testing, and also that writer, Hunter S. Thompson. He pushed to the fore the dark images of Las Vegas. He had that famous, he summed up Las Vegas in a two-sentence description of circus. Do you remember it? The circus is what the whole hep world would be doing Saturday night if the Nazis had won the war. This is the Sixth Reich. When I read that as an 18-year-old, I laughed, and I imagine Hunter S. Thompson laughed when he wrote those lines. But I think people have taken those lines way too seriously, including Stephen King, you may remember. I think I have a minute left. He wrote The Stand. Boy, that book did a number on Las Vegas. Do you remember the supernatural antagonist, Randall Flagg? He reorganizes society in post-apocalyptic Las Vegas, pits his followers against the more benign community of Boulder, Colorado, where everyone is. Have you been to Boulder, people? No, Boulder's lovely too. Goes downhill from there. Relentless dogpiling. Mike Davis's Las Vegas versus Nature essay from his book Dead Cities. But if you look deeper, for example, at Megan's books over there on the table, yes, she does the same thing. She embraces the dark side of Las Vegas and then gives us a more deeper portrait of the characters of the setting. That's my one. And arrives at something special. The changing nature of Las Vegas, in other words, it's in this literary description, is improving. But I think it might be improving, and I'm going to leave things on a darker note. I think it's because everything has sort of been flattened in terms of dystopias with regard to COVID, the election of Donald Trump. We've been living in a dystopia as a nation, as a world for a number of years now. And so I'm interested to see how Las Vegas will be presented in upcoming novels, essays, academic books. I think Las Vegas is not the same. I think some of the danger has been muted by the larger, more real dangers that are out there. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Jarrett. Much to think about. And as you walk around Las Vegas, you can see some of the things Jarrett has talked about very easily. I'd like to introduce Erica Vital-Lazar, Professor of Creative Writing and Marginalized Voices in Dystopian Literature at the College of Southern Nevada. Her fiction has appeared in Catalyst, Sojourner, Thrice and Callaloo 2, as well as the anthologies A River Underground and Anarchy of Memories. Her photo narrative installation Obsidian and Neon, Building Black Life and Identity in Las Vegas, produced in partnership with veteran photographer Jeff Scheid, highlights the lives of Black Las Vegans. She is editor of the series Of the Diaspora, published by McSweeney's. Erica.
Okay, I'm going to attempt to say a word that I am morally opposed and always avoid, even in the most informal conversations, home conversations. I do not use this word. So bear with me. I will attempt to say it. It may or may not come out, but I'm sure you can imagine it. I was born in Athens, Georgia, and spent many summers as a child picnicking with my family at the feet of Confederate generals carved in stone. We ran relays in the park, smacked lips through the woody tang of my father's barbecue sauce, strung worms like worry beads into the waters of the East Prong, knowing that the horseshoe set and charcoal, jump ropes and balls, along with our sun-soaked bodies, well-fed and worn, must be gathered and gone from the park well before dusk, when the residents of Stone Mountain might sweep through, mounted on pickups, flags raised, whoops resounding, participating in their own family ritual of invisible nights and Confederate suns. We would leave with a kind of studied frenzy, my mother performing calm as she folded up picnic blankets, stacked the baskets, and led us one by one to the car. The fear was our price to pay for the dream of normalcy, the toll for impromptu Polaroids streaked with the pastel light of the 70s, an incidental's fee for the fleeting protest of my father's smoke, having blurred from our view for a time the partition faces, fancy hats and hooves perched at the mountaintop. Later, my family would move to Virginia, not far from where the first indentured, then enslaved Africans were disembarked. On field trips, I would walk the places those first 20 had walked, skip and hold hands across the cobbled stones of the Via della Rosa or Fort Monroe in Jamestown. I spent my elementary years pledging allegiance beneath the portrait of one of those Stone Mountain generals who seemed to have followed me to my new home. And come Thanksgiving, was taught, along with my classmates, the delicate craft of tracing the gravestones of slave owners, hanging the drawings as holiday banners in our classrooms, and calling it art. But it would take over 4,000 miles and a new 2 decades travel from the South to Nevada before I would ever be called a nigger. The moment was of great interest to me because I was walking down a Reno street with my baby in his stroller and my mother by my side. We'd finished what passed for a lavish meal at the pepper mill and were basking in the glow of soft neon bulbs. We were flush with the winnings of getting a fussy baby to quiet, his sleepy legs kicking as we made our way back to our hotel. I could blame it on walking small town streets. If Reno is the mama of Nevada, Las Vegas is its slightly lascivious and more worldly youngest daughter, fresh and rebellious, a vocabulary more valley girl than Reno's peculiar mix of Annie Oakley and Scarlett O'Hara. The wheels of the stroller slalomed gently, my mother and I talking about one thing or another. She was proud. Our trip had been paid for. There was a panel I was to attend, a contest to judge after. I was a new mother, an artist, an adjunct professor, being all the things I had dreamed of when the late model Chevy and El Camino is the form it takes for me in memory, a vehicle uncertain of itself, not quite car and not quite truck, sped past. That word and a beer can had been pitched at our feet, an offering. Born in Louisville, Kentucky, Muhammad Ali became the bread of Las Vegas. The brassy glamour, the fast talk, the punch that remains unmatched. The jut of his jaw, the beauty of his brow, lathed neon atop of neon to package into television. The West on a shelf as dry goods. I never imagined what would happen here, or that the many past we come from afar to outrun just might refuse our leaving. The desert is said to transform. The shaman and preacher journey into its depths, urgent to seek God, to sublimate the self. But how far does stone travel? I wonder as I brush strings of beery foam from my face and hands, tuck and untuck the baby's blanket, convinced he has been marked, stricken by history's reverberation. Had I forgotten the need to pack up our things before dark? The ritual of rounding up and coming down off stone mountains. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. The hand can't touch what the eye can't see. The word in Reno becomes deed in Las Vegas. When I discover I am paid far less than my colleagues, becomes brick when the baby in the stroller grows to become a white child's academic rival and an expulsion is orchestrated. Becomes beer can when invited to attend a historic celebration commemorating Las Vegas's prospecting days. My 2 sons are distracted and step out of the frame and I follow. With our absence, a publicist taking photos slyly rejoices, now that's Americana, when all that is left in the image are white faces and horses. The vortex is a place of illusion. The trick at the center, hard as caliche, a mirage that shimmers over the husk of slain Mawapa, Washoe, Shoshone. There are new stones to cut in this desert. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Let me see here. Now we have Nikki Korda. Spent her early career in feature film development in Los Angeles, with stints at 20th Century Fox and Michael Douglas's company at Paramount. She began producing and writing independently with the award-winning documentary Urban Rescuers, and continues to follow her passion for nonfiction film with her business, Life Portraits. Nikki teaches a variety of film, video, and English classes at the College of Southern Nevada and Nevada State College. She holds a BS in film from Boston University and an MFA in creative writing from Sierra Nevada College. She is the founder of the Nevada Women's Film Festival, now in its 7th year. Nikki.
Well, I thought this was about subverting the myth of Las Vegas, which is what I've always dreamed of doing. So what do you think about when you imagine women in Las Vegas? A couple of years ago, there was a silly meme going around about what each state hates. For example, people in Montana were said to hate going to the gym, and Kansas hated Seinfeld. What did Nevada hate, according to this meme? Feminism. Well, I'm here to subvert this idea for you. About 8 years ago, I was teaching in the film department at CSN, and I saw a big discrepancy in the enrollment of women students to men. There were far fewer women. And so I began a student club to address this inequality, and the need was clear, not just on campus, but universally. We quickly transformed into a full-fledged annual event, the Nevada Women's Film Festival. Our mission then and now is to celebrate and support the fair representation of women in film. This was a very exciting time, and we received hundreds of film submissions by and about women from all over the world. And in the years since, there's been no shortage of fascinating stories of all genres. In addition to US and Canadian films, we might have a documentary from Spain or El Salvador, or a comedy from France. And while we appreciate the fact that we can present women filmmakers from all corners of the globe, of course, we have seen plenty of homegrown talent too. As we've evolved, it has not been lost on me what a unique opportunity it has been to showcase our Nevada artistic community to the world. And as a women's festival, we've been particularly proud to help subvert the myth of Las Vegas. What is this myth? Back when I was in college in Boston, I once held a conversation with a local Bostonite. I mentioned that I was from Las Vegas. He shook his head with disbelief and muttered, "Oh, how garish." I felt such shame at that moment. This was not the first time I got the message that my hometown was just a flashy neon playground for adults who want to misbehave. As Las Vegas boasted nicknames like Sin City, I didn't know how to argue with him to tell him that wasn't the full story, at least not back then. After college, I lived for many years in Los Angeles, and when I did come back to Las Vegas to live, temporarily, of course, back in '06, I'm still here, I developed a newfound appreciation for the creative community that is my hometown. My father, a musician, was still with us back then, and he relished his final gig, a decade playing piano at the Four Seasons. Las Vegas felt warm and welcoming, and it was clear to me that the artistic community was vibrant and growing. And so when our film festival began, it was an ideal opportunity to begin a tradition of honoring Nevada women filmmakers and women of achievement, to celebrate artists who break the misconceptions of what outsiders might imagine our state, and specifically from Nevada to be, women from Nevada to be. And let me be clear, the idea of the showgirl is not anti-feminist, but obviously the strip is only a small part of what our greater community and women in Nevada are as multifaceted as everywhere else. To brag about some of our honorees, the first year we honored Las Vegas native Rebecca Thomas, who directed Electric Children and episodes of Stranger Things, and another year we honored Diana Eden, a world-famous costume designer. Other honorees have included UNLV grads and documentarians, and their work has entertained and inspired us and helped us to close the representation gap with women in film. And so while Las Vegas does have a reputation for everything that this strip represents, and perhaps deservedly so, our festival will continue to do what we can to subvert the myth. And I think a better meme about our state would say that Nevada hates stereotypes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Brian Ruff. Brian Ruff was born in Detroit, raised in Southern California, and has lived in Las Vegas since 1981, which makes him a long-timer by local standards. When he's not writing articles, screenplays, short stories, and Las Vegas novels such as Dice Angel, Money Shot, and The House Always Wins, he runs Imagine Communications, a marketing and public relations firm. On a personal note, Brian is married with 2 grown daughters and 5 grandchildren. In his spare time, he enjoys reading, playing guitar, and watching zombie movies. Brian.
Oksana, you might have to throw something at me. I'm not sure I'm going to be I'm not sure I can see over this podium here. So welcome to the fabulous Sahara. I have not been here since it was the original Sahara in 2011. Then it closed, it rebranded. What was it called, like the SOS? SOS, which is really appropriate. And now we're back. Recycling names and hotels and other stuff is a common Las Vegas theme. I'm going to talk about some other themes as well. I moved out here for a job and thought I'd be here 2 to 3 years. That was 40 years ago. Vegas gets its hooks in you. Got married, had kids, did the whole thing. It was a good town to do that back then. I'm glad we're not doing that again right now, for many of the reasons that Jared mentioned. People also tend to move and come back. Anybody in this audience local who has moved away? And it's another common Las Vegas theme. We have a very strong gravitational pull. If I had more time, I'd talk about why that is. I'd been here about 20 years, and I started getting really annoyed about the way the mass media were portraying Las Vegas, and we've touched on that a little bit already. But the stereotypes started really getting to me, and you'd see the New York Times would send in a reporter, a journalist for a day or a week. They would come here looking for irony, and they'd write about drive-through wedding chapels and street hustlers, and it was just very surface. And I didn't see anything that really spoke to the town that I was starting to really love. So I thought, well, if nobody's doing it, or we're not seeing a lot of that, I'll take a shot at doing it myself. You look at the movies, you look at the Hangover, which is super successful. I only saw the first one. But in all these years, I haven't met Mike Tyson. I've never seen a tiger outside of a cage, thankfully. If you look at a movie like Very Bad Things, again, they focus on just the tourist experience. Although I have never personally accidentally killed a hooker in a hotel room, and neither is anyone that I know. So I decided I was going to take a different approach. By the way, as Yogi Berra once said, you can learn a lot, you can observe a lot just by watching. And it's true. If you look at the people that are here, the visitors ostensibly having a good time, especially late at night or early in the morning, there's a desperation there. The secret is we're not as much fun as we are portrayed. In my real job, which is I'm a marketing guy, I admit it's our fault. What is our unofficial slogan? Or now, I guess, after all these years, it's our official slogan. Somebody?
What happens here?
There you go. What happens here stays here. And, again, the portrayal is much different than for those of us who live here. Those of us who live here rarely or never go to the Strip unless we work there, because it's a pain in the ass. And it would be like living across the street from Disneyland. You wouldn't want to go there every day. We have a love-hate relationship with the town, and especially with the tourists. We appreciate them, we appreciate the revenue they bring in, but we try to stay away from them because they just muck up the works. And in a lot of ways, we wish they would just leave their cash and go home. When I drive to Los Angeles, and I generally come back around the same time that everybody's leaving on a late Sunday, so I'm looking at the 250-mile parking lot on I-15, and I'm zipping through back home, and I'm thinking these people have been here for a long weekend, they're broke most likely, they're hungover, they feel like crap, they're pissed off, and you know what? In 3 months, they're gonna do it again. And it always seems to me like our town is like childbirth. You forget all of the pain and you wind up giving it another shot. So common cliches, all locals work in the gambling industry. 1 minute, all right. I'm not even close to done. So, but I'm last, right? Sin City, everything goes, American Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not true. Prostitution isn't legal, drunk driving isn't tolerated. Again, it's not as much fun as we're portrayed. You know, that's why they have those signs up in the hotel casinos, you know, when the fun stops. But for a lot of people, it hasn't started. So wrapping up, mostly those of us who live here just go about our lives. You know, just like anybody else, raising our families and making a living, and it used to be easier, but you know, and when you talk about what future fiction and movies and novels are going to look like, I'm guessing some of it. I'm waiting for a Las Vegas Chinatown, something about the lack of water. If you've seen the lake lately, it's pretty scary. So drink up. In summary, why do we live here? And with apologies to Dorothy Parker, and also Harry Fagal, and anybody else that writes poetry, I did a little knockoff that I'm hoping will explain it. Crocodiles eat you, mosquitoes bite, hurricanes beat you, twisters cause blight, earthquakes aren't funny, forest fires don't play, floods cost money, you might as well stay.
Thank you, Brian, and our whole panel. I hope it's given, I like to think of it as kind of a patchwork that comes together to make kind of a picture of quite a fascinating place. But we have a question for each panelist, and I think, first of all, you're going to start. All right. And there's a mic on the table there you can pass around.
So my question is to Uli. Well, as a fellow musician, I'm always fascinated with the language of music and how it can connect to very deeply to our hearts, even if we don't understand the language. So my question relates to that. Linguist Noam Chomsky believes that language shapes identity. So my question to you is, how do you think music language, does it have the power to shape a human identity, and if so, how?
Absolutely. Music is really a direct expression of your social surrounding. So any style, any stylistic ideas will be represented in your music. That's why we have all the different dialects of music when you go around the world. And the dialects reflect in the language, and the language reflects in the music. Think of, let's say, Spanish music. You know, when you have Cuban music, it is very, the melody is not even at times so pronounced, it's very rhythmical. As opposed to like Portuguese, which has a much more flow. When you listen to Brazilian music, it's much more melodious. Same with French, and you can make an analogy for almost any language, and you will come out that. And how does that shape you? Well, it shapes you. When you grow up in a more melodious environment, you think more melodious possibly, and when you more grow up in a very fast-paced environment, you think more fast-paced. I mean, that goes to just the normal differences. When you grow up in the South, it's usually much more relaxed than if you grow up in the North, which is colder and people talk faster and life happens faster. And that's actually applicable through everywhere in the world. You know, it's same in Germany with the Southerners and Northerners, same in France, same in England, wherever you go, you know. So music is a direct expression of our soul and of our surrounding, and thus directly reflects our upbringing and shapes our upbringing as well.
Thank you so much. That's really fascinating. That means that we can learn about each other through the music that we make.
Absolutely. If you look at any music, it can teach you a lot if you have the eyes and the understanding and the want for it. Absolutely. And a culture can only really be understood through its music and its art and as an expression.
I believe that too, but I think we're a little biased here, right? As artists and musicians.
It's not only the bias, it's the experience, and I've worked a lot of other things too. But it's just that's the basic path. You know, where does the soul express itself? In art. And any kind of outpouring art, whether it's poetry, whether it's music, whether it's sculpting, drawing, painting, that's when the artist, what do artists do? They take the moment and shape them through their own experiences. It's a reflection upon the actual reality.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I have a question for Mark Hall Patton. I am wondering about your time with Pawn Stars and what kind of influence it had on your experiences at the museum and just your life in Las Vegas.
Okay, well, if you're going to go on a television show and you want to have your life turned upside down, pick one that's on in 151 countries and translate it into 32 languages. That's what happened with Pawn Stars. Pawn Stars called me out of the blue when they were doing their pilots in 2009 and asked me whether I could look at a West Point uniform coat and tell them whether it was real and could do it on camera. And it turned out that I had no shame on camera. I didn't know that at the time. I'm a museum director. That's what I had trained to be. That's what I'd gone to graduate school to be. That's what I did my entire career as. And I ended up coming back, and I've done over 200 appearances on the show. And what was interesting is I never got paid for any of those. I still haven't. But I went on the show to advertise my institution. And it ended up working. Attendance at the county museum went up 70% as time went along. Attendance at a number of the other museums in the valley went up because nobody could keep track of where I worked. And so people would come in and say, "Where's the guy in the hat?" And look for me. And they'd say, "Well, he doesn't work here, but pay your money and you can go on through." And it made it impossible for my wife and I to appear in public without getting stopped. I've already been stopped here in the hotel for photographs. I was stopped in the parking lot for photographs. It is a very strange thing to become a public entity when you're a museum director. I mean, think about that. What is more boring than a museum director? I have people writing to me for autographs. My autograph sells on eBay, for God's sake.
Does the Clark County Museum still have the cardboard cutout of you that people can use when you're not there?
No, they have taken that down, and rather than let them throw it away, I put it in one of my storage units. So I have it myself now. But yes, while I was there, you could come out, and it was there because people were complaining that I wasn't there 24/7. And they were coming out to see me and get a picture with me. It messed with my ability to do my job because I was constantly coming out and taking pictures. The county used me in advertising. I had to show up for county events, not museum events, but other county events. I have done ads in terms of Hunter S. Thompson. I just did an ad with somebody who worked with him for 10 years for Harley Davidson, because they wanted somebody that could talk about the history of Las Vegas. And I was a recognized historian here, but the nice thing about it is it's a show that people watch positively and a lot of kids watch. And I've had a lot of kids show up because they like the history in it. It's a reality show, yes, but they don't know what I'm going to show what I'm going to say when I show up. You know, what I'm saying is not scripted. I do my own research. I never give them a price on anything, because you don't go to a museum to buy stuff, you know, not a real museum, you know, and so I maintain my own integrity when I did it, and I continue to do it now, even though I'm retired, because it still has a positive. But it completely turned our lives upside down. I went to Ireland a few years ago with Colleen, and we got off the plane. I walked up to passport control, and the guy in the window looked at me and said, "Hello, Mark." And I was still holding on to my passport. So, you know, all I could tell Colleen was, and it's my wife, and we've been married 43 years, like I said, was I'm never going to mess around on her, because I'd never get away with it.
If you have a chance to go to the Clark County Museum, which was the place where everyone went to try to see you, it really is a wonderful museum. I think it costs $2? $2, so.
Or $1 if you're like me and over 55.
So, you know, save your money and then go to the Clark County Museum. It really is a wonderful look at the history of the whole valley. Thank you so much, Mark.
Mark, did you notice anybody using you as a Halloween costume? I think I saw someone actually this year.
Yeah, there. It goes up on my thing. I did not see it this year. I know that in 2011, I heard about, because of, it was a friend of a friend, but there was an 11-year-old kid in New York State who came as me for a costume, and I found, somebody sent me a link to a guy who showed on his blog, an adult who showed how he put together a Mark Hall Patton costume.
That is.
It's like, it's not
That's
all
brilliant.
that hard, folks. The beard's the only problem part if you don't have one already.
Thank you. Harry.
That's me.
That's you. My question for you is this. So you spent first part of your life, first part in law enforcement, and now you're an artist, and I'm sure you've always been an artist, but I'm curious about that. Is it a duality? I mean, how did those two people coexist, or how do they?
Well, this thing on, test. It's, I mean, this is called Subverting the Myth, right?
Ah.
So the myth about police being, you know, robotic animatronics built by Walt Disney to beat the shit out of people is not true. Although sometimes one wonders, right? But the truth is that being an artist and a police officer was an excellent dichotomy for creation. The information, the situations, the processes which I was exposed to in my 25 years of serving the community were all very much symbiotic with my ability to express myself. So it worked in tandem, I would say, very, very well throughout my career. I was writing poetry long before I became a police officer. That the fact that I would do poetry in front of cops, that was a step that was hard to take. And I can tell you that I was doing an open mic at Cafe Roma at 4440 Maryland Parkway. It's gone now. They've taken that whole campus village. It's not there. But that was kind of a hub, and I know that PJ Perez just released a film about from the 90s about Maryland Parkway, and I think it's called. I'm not trying to plug him, but he's a great guy. I wish I want to get the title right if I say it. Parkway of Broken Dreams. That's it. Thank you. And there's not a lot of narration, but it really was a time that was very interesting, and I was involved in that. I'd been a UNLV graduate, and I was there, and I was working as a policeman, and I was hanging out and doing poetry. And a guy that I worked with, who was an old school, like 6'5", you know, the kind of guy you don't want to see out on the street, kind of cop, named Steve Custer, took me under his wing and knew that I was doing this. And he said, hey man, I've heard you read these poems. You need to do it in front of the police. And I was like, fuck no. I don't want to be killed. So he said, nah, he actually used a rather unflattering term to describe my fear. And that was like, for me, I'm not a very smart person. I'm very easily challenged, and I got ruffled, and so I went and read poetry to the police. And when I did it, it was meaningful, not just to me, but to them. And so I began to do it often, and more often. And then my first book was published, and then a lot of people started to realize, hey, this guy's a cop and he's a poet, and there was a little notoriety for it. But most of all, it was a way to prove to myself and to the rest of the world that you don't have to fit into a box, ever. That's your choice. So I choose not to fit in any box. You know, I'm Harry Fagal, I'm a human being. That's the one thing we all share in common. After that, it's anybody's game.
That's probably why you're an artist, because that's kind of our problem. We don't fit in.
I know, and you know what? I got good with that. I embrace not fitting in now.
Yeah. Oh,
So
definitely.
I can be honest, and I'm tough enough that I don't care.
Perfect. That's why we're all here. Thank you.
Thank you. Smattering of applause.
I have a question for Jarrett.
Why not?
You've written a whole lot of things, and you teach a lot of people how to write. And I am wondering what you're working on now, and whether it has anything to do with Las Vegas.
Wait, yes.
Yes, I am working on something now.
Can you share?
It is a novel set in post-apocalyptic Las Vegas, where teenagers kill each other with drones that they've made themselves with 3D printers and things of that nature. So it's a thing I think about a lot as technology becomes cheaper, more accessible, and wilder. And it's very true to the spirit of Las Vegas prior to the pandemic, but I also hint at how things could have gone even worse. And we just have to hope that it doesn't, and just work hard to build the little community that we have going here now and keep the momentum going.
I did notice in the new Las Vegas library for East Las Vegas, they have 3D printers that the kids are allowed to use.
Yeah, I wonder what they're building there.
I think I know now.
I hope it's just those Pokemon spinners. What are those things? Fidget spinners? Was that a term? I don't know. No, there's 3D printers at UNLV. I watch them closely.
And what are you building with that?
Hi, Erica. We know each other. We all know each other, right? So my question is this. You spoke of this vortex, which is a space that exists in Las Vegas. Do you feel that it's changing? It has changed during the pandemic in any way? Like this thing, right? The spot on the sun, and how, if so?
Wow, you had to ask me that question.
Yes.
I think that's a beautiful question too for Jarrett, because he said something that resonated with me, that Las Vegas has at this point become not a lodestar, but one in the constellation of sort of already seeming post-apocalyptic life that has become mundane. We're all sort of living in the same environment, isolated, anxious, on the verge of insanity, but also finding new ways to love one another more deeply. So I don't know if that's an answer.
That is an
to your
answer,
question.
right? That is an answer. Love is not easy, so maybe that's something that we needed, right?
Yes,
For all of
yes.
this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a question for Brian. Brian has written 3 novels set in Las Vegas. I would call them a Las Vegas of the current day, even though you've written them over the years. And so I'm wondering if there's a 4th one in the works, and if you too might look to the future or to the past.
Yes, I'm writing a post-apocalyptic. No, I'm kidding.
I am too now.
There we go. It's such a great idea. Let's just collaborate, right? Yes, actually, and I still have the day job. I work for a PR and marketing firm here in town. So these books, I have to get up real early or write on the weekends and steal the time. So I'm not as prolific as some people, but after 20 years of trying to think of a sequel for Dice Angel, my first Las Vegas novel, I've come up with an idea for it, and my protagonist was about 40, 20 years ago, so I'm going to age him, and I'm going to, deal with all of that in addition to all the things that have happened in Las Vegas over the years. So I've been taking notes, like Yogi Berra said. As far as, what was the rest of your question? I'm sorry.
So the one you're working on now is set in a current Las Vegas,
It
more
is,
or less?
yes. It's a current, and it'll have an element of mystery. I'm more of what they call a pantser, as opposed to a planner or a plotter when it comes. So I've got a general idea of what's going to happen. I've got a lot of snippets of dialogue and little pieces of business and things that I've seen over the years. And we'll see what makes the cut. But, when I start these books, which are all mysteries to a certain extent, I never know how they're going to end. And I figure if I'm surprised, then maybe the readers will be too. But, it's almost one of these days I'm sure I'm going to write myself into a corner and then not know what to do. But knock on whatever this is, sheet metal, it hasn't happened yet.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And now I think we'd like to open it up if anyone has any questions, comments, or would like to ask.
Yeah, you missed one panelist.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh, I thought we were done. Sorry.
One more. Nikki. I'm actually glad we're finishing up with Nikki because my 14-year-old calls me a slow burn optimistic. So I wanted to ask you, what kinds of stories would you like to see being told about Las Vegas?
Well, this is actually short and sweet.
Okay.
As much as I'm looking forward to the post-apocalyptic, I really am. I would really like to just put it out there that there are more stories, fictional and otherwise, that take place in the setting of Las Vegas, not because it's Las Vegas, but just like it's any other city, because we are. So maybe without all the goings-on of the Strip and downtown. Would that be too boring? I don't know. I mean, it just
I don't even
not
know if that
about
would be
Las
possible.
Vegas. Yeah, just about the actual, characters and plot and everything else, but it just happens to be in Las Vegas.
So like Pride and Prejudice, but in Las Vegas.
Exactly.
Why not? Why haven't we done that yet?
So we don't have to hear it so garish ever again.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
So now we can. Sorry, Nikki.
That's okay.
So now, if anyone has any questions or would like to discuss anything with any of our panelists, please join the conversation. Somebody out there. Amanda.
Thank you everyone who participated. I love listening to everyone speak. I am hoping for Pride and Prejudice set in Las Vegas. That's an invitation to anyone. But I was struck by something that Jared said about the danger of Las Vegas having been muted. And I am curious, as we are kind of hopefully moving out of an unprecedented time, where you all see Las Vegas moving toward in the near future.
You want all of us to answer that?
Whoever is interested to answer, I would be interested in your response.
Okay, I start quickly because I'm the only one who actually didn't talk about Las Vegas specifically, which when I thought about the theme, then I forgot about that. I've been here for 12 years, and what I've seen is, music or entertainment. Las Vegas is the capital of entertainment in the world, right? What does entertainment mean? It means you take any kind of artistic vision, try to funnel it down so that it can be distributed to the masses and all become wallpaper, just easily digestible. Now, I've seen that too, but I'm also teaching in the university, and I've revitalized some of the jazz field here in the years that I've been doing it. And I see, although there's a lot of entertainment, and I think that came straight out of the pandemic, I see also a lot of artistic endeavors that were there as well before, and the pandemic might have had some stimulus to it. And I see more creativity happening in Las Vegas than when I first got here. And I find it actually very hopeful. There's more independent things, there are more artists that want to do their own thing. or actually discover who they are as artists and not just as a reproductive machine of some, entertainment value. And so I'm actually fairly hopeful. And I see Las Vegas actually as a ground, now as a very fertile soil. You know, there's already the second, the third, the fourth generation now of Las Vegas. And as well of the artists that came here and the entertainers that came here. And these young offsprings really show a lot. I have had, and that's the last statement I'll do, I have had a lot of wonderful students that went to Miami, they went to Eastman, they went to all kinds of great colleges, do their masters there, and as opposed to going, the next step would be going to New York, where actually I used to live many years, but they come back to Las Vegas. And that's something that I find extremely amazing, that artists decide that they're not going there where actually the center of their activity could be, but they're deciding, no, I think Las Vegas has a lot to offer.
I obviously see things a little bit differently as an historian rather than creatively viewing things. But I would say one of the things that I've seen here, and I have a great deal of hope for the future, is that Las Vegas has changed in the 28 years that I've been here. And it's changed a lot because the population of the area, not only has it grown cancerously, but it's also grown with a lot of kids growing up here. When I first moved over here, more people took the LA Times on Sunday than took the RJ. Now, people don't take the newspaper anymore, but the idea behind that is that more people were tied to where they were from than where they were living. And that was true for the Chicago Daily Times and the New York Times. More people took their hometown newspapers than the newspaper here. They were not tied to Las Vegas. This was still a transient community. The idea of people living here, and I think Brian made the comment about how it gets its claws into you, and really if you're here for 5 years, you stay here, pretty much. But if you grow up here, this isn't where you move to. This is home. And because it is home, this is becoming a community that is their community, not the community that we moved into. Because, I mean, I'm a fourth generation Orange County, California. That was home for me. You know, this is where I moved to. I can bore you to tears about the history of it because that's what I did when I got here, was learn the history of it. And that's what I've done all my time here, you know, dealing with the history of it. But my son and my daughter were children when they got here. They grew up here. This is their home, you know, and folks like that have a different sense of the community. And so they see this town differently. They're not seeing the Strip as why they wanted to be here. You know, they see this, you know, they grew up through the schools and all of that. This is just home for them. The water issue is one they're aware of, but they buy into, yeah, let's get rid of the grass. We don't need grass. You know, we understand. We got to save, you know, we got to do something to deal with this. This is a real issue. So I think we are going to see this continual transformation. You know, the kids going through UNLV, there's a lot of locals that, you know, these are kids in many cases that grew up here. They went through the local schools. They're not coming in from the outside. They didn't just move here. Yes, there are a lot that did, but it's changing the nature of the community as it goes along. So I think there's reason for some hope for the future and for the fact it's going to change the flavor of the community as it goes along. You know, we're always going to have people coming in because, you know, if you're gambling, this is Mecca. You're going to come here, you're going, you know, we're going to have people coming in here, but we're also building a community here as well. That is an interesting one to watch. So, just my view on it.
So I expect a whole torrent of books and movies and documentaries about Vegas and the pandemic. And I'm thinking somebody's going to come out with, you know, craps in the time of COVID or something along those lines. But I think that is going to be, whoever's first one in is probably going to do a good job, and then you're going to have all the followers after that. So I'm just putting out all these ideas. Somebody needs to take it and run with it.
I think we're running up against the end of our time. Some of our panelists have brought books that are available at the back of the room if you'd like to take a look at them. And thank you so much for joining us for this unusual look at Las Vegas. I hope enlightening. Thank you.
Oh yeah, it took a little while.